All right, let's get this thing going. Hello, everyone. Only a couple of us on here right now. Hopefully, um, others will stroll in. I know for a lot of people, this is, um, you know, really either early in the morning or in the middle of the night for a lot of people. So I want to be respectful of your time. I have probably a lot more. Um, Probably have a lot more planned tonight than we'll be able to get to. But before we get started, I just want to kind of reset expectations and let everybody know like what this is going to be. We've had a few weeks of comments and everything else going on. Um, and if you guys could just real quick, if you could just throw a comment in the comment section, let me know if you can hear my audio and everything's good. I set up a new computer from the uh, really recently. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. All right. Well, no comments yet, but oh, 1 second. All right. Thank you, Murray. All right. So I switched over from my Mac machine to a Linux Mint machine that I'm using now. So right now it's going to be kind of up in the air whether or not everything's good. I also try to go from 1080p down to 720p to see if the internet connection can hold. Um, if the internet connection can possibly keep up this time because we had a few issues last time. But let's just reset. What are we doing in this live stream? Um, well, primarily what I want to do is just spend time letting you guys ask questions, and we're programming something together, and we're building a e-commerce site. But that's not the number one thing we're doing. If you're here and your number one goal is to quickly build an e-commerce site, probably not the right series for you. We are going to build that, but it may take us a while because I really want to slow down. And instead of just copying all the code that I type, I really want to spend time with you guys as if you were with me, looking over my shoulder and asking questions about what I'm doing, uh, and things like that. And I don't even care if we get off topic or anything like that. Let's just kind of um, roll with the punches. You guys tell me what you want. But I just wanted to kind of reiterate that we are building an e-commerce site. We're using the MVC uh, framework that we built on the series. It doesn't matter what framework you choose to use, but this should give you an idea of how they work. And my goal is that you guys come out of this, each one of these parts, like tonight's part two, learning something new that you didn't know before. And so that's my goal. If you guys have any questions, please ask them. Um, I really that's why I wanted to do this live. If you guys aren't going to interact with me, I could just record these and upload them like I did before. I think it's more valuable though, and the reason I wanted to try the live scene is just so that we can, um, interact. I mean, that's what live is all about. So thank you guys who are here. It looks like Murray, Steve, JJ. Um, Also, if you guys haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel so that you will get alerts and notifications when I do these live streams. Right now, I'm planning on doing at least till the end of January, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central. That's my time where I'm at. I know a lot of you guys are in the UK or Paris or wherever. It's probably like 3 or 4 in the morning for you. Sorry about that, but I commend your dedication. And I'm a little bit sick, so my voice sounds a little weird. I'm sorry. And if I have to run to the bathroom, I'll just kind of tell you guys and I'll put it on pause and we'll continue. That being said, after getting a lot of comments on the framework and other things that have come up since the last live series, I want to spend a little bit of time uh, fixing a few things in the framework. I also want to kind of just go through how the framework works very briefly, just to give you guys a recap of there's a lot of people who joined, and there's been a little over 1,000 people who watched the live stream last time. Um, and most of those people did not go through the MVC framework with us. So I thought they were like, "What is this? What are we doing?" how come you have that function available? So I'm just going to go through quickly on that. And then um, my goal for tonight is I would like to start building our admin panel. So where on the site, if you have an e-commerce site, it'd be nice to be able to log in as an admin user to a separate uh, back-end area or portal where you can add products. Last time we kind of just started printing our product to the screen. We didn't get very far with that, not a big deal. That'll come very quickly once we get going. But we need a way to add products to our system. And so I thought we could start by building a new layout, and we're gonna build a whole new layout, and we'll build a whole new menu just for the admin side. And I'm gonna show you guys how to add, because another question was, how do I add additional permissions? If someone's logged in, they see everything. What if I want to say that someone's a super user or someone's like a editor or something, like a different access that WordPress and things like that have? We can do that with this framework actually very easily. And so we're going to go through some of that. But the one thing that I do want to do for those of you who have done this framework, have built it with me, looks like Steve has started the framework. That's cool. But it's still not, in my opinion, I didn't know how many videos that was going to go for. My goal wasn't originally to make a really awesome framework. It was just to kind of explain how they work. But it's turning into a really cool framework, and people are using it in their projects. And so one thing I hate about this framework is the validation, the form validation, and how that works. So I spent some time refactoring how validation works. But it didn't feel like a framework type validation. It didn't feel even really like it was object-oriented approach to validation. So we're going to fix that, and we're going to learn some pretty cool object-oriented programming concepts tonight when we do that. So if you guys, I would love to just refactor that with you guys. I haven't done it on my video. And then what I would like to do is cut that section out of this live video and add it to the MVC framework as a separate video. Yeah, JJ got a question. Is it possible to use more than one table on a model? That's a really good question, JJ. And so a lot of frameworks, what they do is they have a way to define in your models like relationships, whether it be like a relationship between a user and a sessions table would be a good example of things that we already have in this framework. And what happens is you usually say, hey, this has one or belongs to another thing, so that you can use foreign keys and things like that to join those data sets together. And I'm going to be honest with you, the reason that I have not really added that functionality built into the model of this, and I've been bouncing back and forth the idea of doing so, I haven't, because we use a framework with a really awesome ORM, which is an object relational model that you can use. The problem is this: when you start joining models together with objects, and these objects get very, very large, and when you're trying to loop through those, like say in a table with a lot of data, your server will actually run out of memory for that PHP application, and it'll crash. And so it's not very performant to take a model object that has a bunch of methods and a bunch of data and then join that onto other objects. It's better and more efficient to actually write custom joins with SQL queries and then turn those into objects as you need them. And so that's probably how we're going to handle this situation, JJ, when we get to the point of needing to join stuff together, which will be very soon, because we had an instance where we're adding images, and we don't really want our images stored in our products table or our brands, or our we also added a vendors. Those are all going to be in separate tables, so we're going to have to do a lot of joining to get that information. But we want to do it in a really efficient way so that our application runs fast, and so that we don't have long page load time and things like that. And but there is a cool way that you can take the data that you get from your joins and turn them into objects and still have all your functionality with the models. So yes, we will be doing some of that. And I may just go and add some of this stuff like the has many or belongs to or has one. type thing that other frameworks have. I'm telling you, in a professional environment, I, it's easy, but it's not performant. And what ends up happening is a lot of times developers write code like that, and then senior level developers have to go back and they almost always, to fix performance issues, they almost always rewrite those cool little things that the frameworks do for them to make it easy to join tables. They almost always rewrite those as custom queries because they're fast. You can build a custom query in MySQL that can pull so much information very, very, very efficiently and quickly. You start doing it inside of an object, man, it gets nasty really quick. That's why I haven't done it yet, JJ. I hope that helps. It's probably not the answer you were looking for, but we will get into some joining stuff. All right, guys. Yeah, if you want to help me out in any way, guys, please feel free to subscribe, share this stuff with other people that may be wanting to learn things. Tell them to subscribe, guys. If you want to, you can send me a super chat or something, but no big deal. Let's get going. If we have any other questions or whatever, first thing, let's just go through really, really quick and get a very brief overview of what this MVC framework is. We're gonna fix one bug because so when I built this, I did it all on my Mac, and like I said, I just redid my computer as a Linux Mint machine, and when I did that, I realized there was a bug in the system because Macs aren't very particular about case, and I never noticed it because it just worked on the Mac, and I loaded it into Linux and instantly saw a bug that I just overlooked a bunch of times. So let's fix that really quick. I actually have that pulled up on the screen, and I'll tell you how to reproduce that bug. So let me go and show the screen real quick. All right, hopefully you guys can see the right screen here. All right, so I have this fatal error uncaught class cookie right here, and the way that I got here actually is I went to log out after I had logged in, and it won't let me do that because it says the cookie class. So when you log out, if it destroys the cookie on the person's machine, and so when it tries to do that, it uses the cookie class, which is a static function or a static method that we created on the class. And if you look right here, there's something very important here. This is in all caps, and Mac didn't care about that, but Linux sure hates it because that's not how the class is actually defined. So let's go and fix that really, really quick. So here in the project, I will pull up, if you go to core, you guys can fix this along with me. It's gonna be real easy. If you look at core cookie right here, this is just a capital C, and then the rest of that's lowercase. That's the reason that it's all broken. But if you look at the function here, we're calling that inside the users model. So if you go to app, models, users, and let's look for the logout. Here's the logout function right here. Actually, let's just search everywhere in our project and see if we have any other areas. I'm just going to look for cookie. So it looks like it's actually in the user session table or model. So in user, it's in the models user session. That's where the bug is at. Yep, right here. So what's happening is it's looking if the cookie exists, and then if it exists, it actually finds it so that we can return the session and ultimately pull the session. But to fix the bug, we just need to actually call this without our caps locks on. So it's cookie this. Maybe some of you guys caught this. All right, that should be good. Fresh. All right, so it logged us out there. All right, so that's that bug I wanted to show you really quickly, but let's just go through and talk a little bit about this framework and how it works. So basically, a framework, we're using a pretty URL type system where um, this part of the URL on my machine is the actual host. So it would be your domain or whatever, or your IP address. And then everything after that um, in this URL is very specific. And you'll notice there's no extensions like .php or anything like that. And sorry about that. And so the reason is because what we're doing is it's important for you to understand that every single request that comes in, no matter what page we're looking at, every request goes through the index.php. There's only one single page that's ever loaded. It's index.php. We set that up with an htaccess file to force that to happen. So every request routes through the index.php. And the reason that's important to know is because you can't really start doing like login.php and things that you might be used to doing in the URL structure. What you do is the first little bit in here, like this register, is going to be a controller. Okay, so what we do is we build controllers for every different area that we want, so that we can really organize our code, and so that other developers can find our code easy. The reason we use MVC frameworks to begin with is it makes the code a lot better to work with teams of people, and also it can help you solve bugs quickly. We want to program in a way that we don't repeat our code anywhere. You end up repeating code a lot if you have a bunch of different pages, because you end up having to like include your headers and footers, and then you have a bunch of functions that run on a post request or anything like that. And so the reason that we do it this way is the index.php, and I'm going to show you very quickly the code after I show you this part. But so it loads the controller first, and then it's looking for an action on this next part. The action is actually just a method on the controller class, so that each controller is a class or an object that gets built from a class. And this next part is a controller action, which is just a method, but it has appended action on the end of it. I'll show you that too really quick. But so it's controller action or method, and then anything after that, if you go and put something like 12 and then yes and then 167 or something like that, what happens is everything after that controller action gets put in as parameters that are passed into this action. So this is a function or a method that is called within the register object, and then everything else comes in as parameters after that, which allows us to write really pretty URLs that are powerful, and also allows us to pass stuff as parameters directly into our controller action. Not much unlike doing a get param, it just looks nicer. But the most important thing is not that we have pretty URLs. The important part is that our code is very organized, and it has we do that for separation of concerns. So if you have back-end developers, front-end developers where you work or whatever, you have people working on the part of the code that they're responsible for. Also makes testing a lot easier and things like that. So at any rate, let's dive in and just briefly go over a little bit of code. So like I told you, everything kind of goes through the index. So let's look at the index really quick. The index file is just basically all that's here, okay, is it's including our config. So this is the file that sets up our config, so that our database connection information and everything else like that. It loads that in first, and then we have an autoloader that is going to go in and autoload our classes. There's some things we can do to refactor that later to make this even better, but the autoloader is simply, you can call a class from anywhere. You don't have to worry about requiring it or whatever. The autoloader requires the classes as you need them and only when you need them. So yeah. JJ asked a question. He said, why does the session expire after 5 to 10 minutes? I need always to relog in. Yeah, I don't know why that would happen. And are you sure the session's expiring, or is it the cookie that's expiring? Because there could be a problem with your cookie expiry being too low or your time or something being out. The session should not expire. You may have a problem with your server or something like that. The session itself should not expire unless you kill the session. You could have something in your code that's killing the session, but the 5 to 10 minute thing sounds almost more like there's a cookie problem where your cookie is being destroyed. So I know you guys are gonna have a lot of questions of bugs and stuff, and it's gonna be really hard for me to help you debug those because I can't, unless I can reproduce it. I can't see the error messages, or we can't really see what's going on. But the first place I would look is the cookie expiry, which was in the config, and go to config.php. Right here, this remember me cookie expiry. Um, this is a value that if you have it set too low, be like 10 minutes, possibly. I don't know. That's just one place to look, but that may not be your issue. It could really be a session problem, which if your session's actually expiring, probably something wrong with Apache, which is what runs the PHP code. So, all right, so back to it. After things are auto-loaded, then what we do is we grab that URL and we're actually turning that into an array, and we basically just go through each segment, and that's we're gonna pass that along to our route, and the router is going to someone said your PHP e-commerce site series was amazing. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for watching that. One of the reasons that I'm doing this is because I actually think that e-commerce thing sucked real bad. It's like the first thing that I did, and I was a very new developer, and the code in it makes me cringe looking at it. But I am very blessed and thankful and honored that it's helped so many people kind of go from not knowing how to program to, you know, entry level developers. I've had probably 30 people message me and tell me they got jobs or internships after doing that series, and even more people who've said that they used it as a project in college to pass their final exam, which is, I never imagined that when I created that. But at any rate, you're very welcome. So then what we do, the next line, so you can see this index page is really, really short, but this next line here, I'm not going to go through every line of code. We're not going to spend too much time. I wanted to give just a brief introduction on how this framework works. But then we're checking here if there's if the session doesn't exist, but there's a remember me cookie, it auto logs the person in. That's all this is doing, is checking your computer or your browser. It says, hey, is there a remember me cookie? Yes. If there is, it attempts to log the person in from that cookie. Okay. The next thing it does is it takes that URL, which actually is an array at this point. It breaks it by / in the URL, and it turns it into an array, and it passes that into the router. The router, we're not going to go through that code. I really recommend that you look at the framework if you want to, or just read the code. I mean, you can learn a lot just from reading line by line. But what it is responsible for is it takes that information and it figures out what controller you're trying to load and what action you're calling, and then it routes the person to there. But before it does all that, it makes sure they have permission to go to that page. So it checks their access level, if they're logged in or not. It'll automatically it'll send them to an error page if they're not allowed to go to the page they're trying to visit. Okay. So that, you know, then what happens is, I'm not going to go into more of the code of what makes it work, but the way the application works is you have inside the app, not inside the core or anything like this. Most of the magic happens when you're building your applications after the framework's built, right here in this app thing. So you have controllers, models, and views, and that is MVC, guys. Controllers, models, and views. We're going to talk about models in a second, but controllers, if you look at the login thing, which I have in the register controller here, basically you can see that this is a controller that gets loaded if you go to register. So there's a login action that the login form posts data right to this login action, okay? And that attempts to log the people in. The log out is a separate action. And then we have a register action, which allows new users to sign up. And so that's how the controller works. The controller is actually handling all your request information, and it'll load in a model or things like that. And then what's really important is the controller loads in your view. So the view is your front end stuff. So if you look at register login, you can see that the login here is a form right here, and this is basically the HTML. The view has the HTML for the form in it. Okay. So then what happens, and I promise I'm almost done, is the model. The model is there's two different ways to look at models in the MVC. Okay. Traditionally, what a model was that a model handled all the business logic of your application. So your model was responsible for loading your model was basically responsible for everything that had any business logic at all. That's not the way this framework works. There's two different mindsets when it comes to models. The other mindset, especially in web development, is a model is related to data, in particular, a table inside of inside your database. So I have a user's model, and I also have a user's table in my database. I have a products model, and I have a products table in my database. Same thing with user sessions. And so these handle the data from the database and any sort of methods or anything else that we need to manipulate that data or insert data into there. We would use the model to do so. So that is how code is kind of organized in this application. I skipped over that in the first video, and I do apologize. I had a lot of people comment and say, hey man, I have no clue what you're doing, because we just kind of started. I talked for a while, and we just built a page half-ass. Yeah, guys, this is my first live stuff. I usually prepare stuff, and I'm kind of going off the seat of my pants. But what I really want us to understand is, again, the goal is to not build an e-commerce site or any site at all. The goal is to become better developers, and we're going to do that together, all of us. I'm going to be a better developer at the end of this series than I was when I started. The reason that I did this, if you're new here, is because I noticed something with the way that I learned to program and everyone else, is that I would figure out everything ahead of time and type everything out, and then you guys would come to me and be like, hey, this doesn't work. And you had no clue. You would send me an error message, and the error message told you exactly what was wrong with it because you misspelled a variable or something. I'm not saying you, whoever's on here, but in general, people on YouTube would misspell something or a lot of typos, and they had no clue how to problem solve. Because if they didn't exactly copy my code right, they were lost. And what that taught me was that people weren't really learning to be developers. They were learning how to copy code. So the most important thing about being a developer is problem solving, and you're going to spend a lot more time reading other people's code. And I would say you only spend about 10% of your time developing, actually typing code out. The rest of the time you're reading code, you're debugging stuff. So I wanted to do this live so that we can learn and do the research together. You guys miss all that when I just go in and record myself talking and typing out a series. So I figured live we could go in and you would see the whole process, which is slow, because development is slow. I don't want you guys have no delusions going into this that you can just build a site overnight or something like that. I mean, you could if you just install a WordPress site and you don't want to code it. This is for people who are learning to develop, to maybe do this as a job. That's my goal. I want to get this has helped my life tremendously. My family's in a better place, and I want to pass that along to you guys. JJ, I'm sorry if I ask a lot of questions, but I like how you explain PHP, and I love learning from you. Thank you very much for the comment. Please do not apologize for asking a lot of questions, because if you have a question, the chances are that someone else are going to have the same question, and they might not have the gall to ask the question or even understand how to ask the question. So if you ask it, it may be that you're helping yourself, but you're helping a lot of other people. So don't be sorry for asking questions. Please ask questions. That's why I want to do this live. Otherwise, we could just record it and I'll just upload it. Okay. So let's jump in to this refactor, because I think I can teach you guys a lot about object-oriented programming during this refactor. And I also think that you'll learn a lot about the framework if you didn't go through the framework course. And even if you did go through the framework course, it's going to help you understand how it all works together, because if we do this refactor right now live, we're gonna dive into a lot of code, and my brain's gonna be really mushy after this because it's a big refactor. But let's do it, man. Don't try to copy along with me right now. Watch, ask questions, come back later and code your own stuff. Don't try to code along with me, guys. It's not gonna work. Okay? Trust me, you can't do it. I'm gonna be changing my screen too much, things like that. All right. Let me just, we're all good here. All right. So, like I said, let me show you the validation class, and I'll show you an example of how it's used, and I'll explain why I hate it. All right. So if you look in core, there's a validate class. And this is okay. I mean, it's not great. All right. It has some cool functionality. The way you have to use it is annoying, and it makes the code look ugly. Because if we do this refactor, you're going to see that these controller actions start looking real pretty. Because there's not going to be any validation stuff going on that you can see inside of the controller's actions. All the validation is going to happen automatically, which is really, really cool. And I'll show you how that works. So this validate class, what it basically does is you pass a huge array, and the array has to be structured just right for this to work. And it's hard to remember, if you don't work with this every day, how that array is supposed to be structured. And since I don't have documentation for this framework yet, you have to read through the code to understand what you can even do with it. There's a lot of cool stuff here, like you can make sure something's required. There's a min and max function, matches. You can check if something's unique in the database. If it's a valid email, you can check if it's numeric if you want that. But overall, this isn't really a good object-oriented approach to doing this for a couple of reasons. The first reason is because if you want to add something new to this, you have to go into this switch statement and add code here, which means you're basically going in and modifying the core files in the framework, and that's not a really great way to do it. The other thing is it's all just convoluted. I mean, if you guys are trying to read this, yeah, you can understand it probably, but it's like, man, I have to read this every single time I use it to remember what the heck I did. And so for that reason, I hate the validation in this framework. And so before we get too far along in our e-commerce site, we're going to do a lot of form validation in our e-commerce site, like a lot, tons of validation. And I don't want to spend a bunch of time on validation. So if we spend a few hours together now, or however long it takes, and we refactor the validation stuff, then anytime we have to go and create a form, like uploading products or people even going through their shopping cart and putting credit card information in and things like that, we have this validation class. And what's more important is after we build it, we don't need to go in and change the validation stuff unless there's a bug or something, because I'm going to show you how to extend this with your own stuff inside the app directory to add custom validators that don't already exist in the ones we're going to build. So if you're ready, let's dive in. All right. Let's just check on YouTube here. Says my stream feed's bad. Am I coming through all right? Is it choppy or gross or anything? Anyhow, hope it's good. All right, so let's just kind of close out. Well, let's leave this validate open because we're going to reference it while we're building a new stuff. And I will admit that this is such a big refactor that I did it ahead of time. So I have another computer over here that I might be looking over to reference how I did something, but I'm going to explain it very well. And if you guys see something or have questions, please stop me, please ask them. Let's go. We're not going to be looking at the browser much. We're going to be all in the code here for a little while, and then we're going to test some stuff on the register form. So I'm going to go ahead and actually pull up the register form. So if you go here, you have to be logged out to get to the register form right now. We may change that at some point. I'm going to click register. It takes me to this page right here. And my screen is, I'm using a new screen too, and it's just so washed out. Like, I hope it's not coming through the video like that, but at any rate, here we go. So right now, if I just click register and I don't fill any of this out, it pops up with this thing, which is cool because it's actually doing validation. It'd be nice if these things turned red, which will make that happen. But the reason I chose this form is because this form has a lot of different validation in it. So this is a good one for us to test as we go through and build our validators. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to, inside core, I'm going to add a new directory here, a new folder, and I'm just going to call this validators. And already I screwed up. So I'm going to make that lowercase. I want my directories. All right. So there we go. And now we have validators. And do you guys know what an abstract class is? Go ahead and comment. Don't feel embarrassed. Just let me know if you guys know what an abstract class is, because I'm going to build one now. Okay. So inside of validators, we're going to add some files. The first file that we need to add is, and this is going to be our abstract class, is custom validator. Okay. Custom validator.php. All right. Now, the thing is so someone asked, what are we working on? Yes, we are going to be building an e-commerce site here, but this really applies to anything. We're just building that because that's what people said. Hey, let's build that together. But more importantly, we've built a framework that we can use for any project. So you can just load this framework in and start building a project as a base starting point. That's what we're ultimately working on. But ultimately, what we're working on is becoming better developers, and we're just using the e-commerce series not to build an e-commerce site, but rather that's just an excuse for us to get together and program and to learn. All right, so we have custom validator. So let's just go ahead and open up our PHP tags. Remember, when we're doing classes, guys, you don't ever want to close your PHP tags. That can cause some issues when it gets auto-loaded in and things like that. So what I want to do is we're going to go ahead and declare this as an abstract class right out of the gate. So let me, in order to do that, normally you would just say class, and then you would do custom validator, and then you just open and close some braces. We're going to do one more thing right before class, a modifier here, and we're going to tell it that this is an abstract class. Okay. So an abstract class, just so that you understand, is okay. An object-oriented program. I don't know about you guys, but when I got my job as a developer, I was scared to death of object-oriented programming. There's something weird when you're new to programming, that object-oriented programming seems so like complex and scary. And I think there's just like a stigma where people don't know how to teach it to make it make sense. But once you get it, you're like, oh man, I'd actually be scared now if I had to program something and I couldn't use object-oriented programming, because it really helps things. It helps simplify things a lot, and it helps mainly to write code that you don't have to repeat. You don't want to repeat code, because if there's a bug, you want to fix it in one spot and then boom, it just fixes it everywhere. That's the benefit. There are some downsides to object-oriented programming, but I'm not going to get into those because I love it. But yeah, just so a class, it's important to know what a class is before we understand what an abstract class is. But a class is a blueprint, basically, that we can build an object from. So imagine, like, if you're building a house, you have a set of floor plans that called the blueprints, and then when you have a bunch of construction workers or a contractor who takes those blueprints and says, here's the floor plan, here's the plumbing, here's the electrical and all that, and then they take it and build the actual house. The house itself is an object. The class is a blueprint. There's a difference between a class and an object. An object is what was built from the class. Class is a blueprint. Object is what's built using the blueprint. So you can extend that. So what's cool about object-oriented programming is you can create a child from a class. So basically, a child could take a class and inherit all of its properties and all of its methods. And a property is just information, it's data, it's a variable, if you will. And a method is just a function that's attached. So the thing is that I'm going to tell you one thing that just, I think, clarifies exactly what object-oriented programming is. Okay? An object wraps the data and the functions that manipulate or use that data into one package. Okay? An object is data and functions that have to do with that data all in one package. And so if you create a child from a parent, it inherits or gets all those same properties and all those methods just out of the gate. It already, imagine like if you're born and your parents have already built something ahead of time, and then you get to inherit that from them. Well, that's the same thing with a child class. But an abstract class is really cool. An abstract class allows me to say, hey, when you build children, so abstract class is a parent class. It's used as a parent class, and so we know that we're going to extend it from the outset. We know we're going to extend this class. But we want to make sure that every one of our children that come from this class have methods. Specifically, in our situation, we need to make sure that there's a method called run validation. If anyone ever creates a class that extends this custom validator abstract class and they don't include the method run validation, then it's going to throw a warning, or actually it's going to break. It's just going to, you're going to see an error message on the screen that said, hey, what's up? Where's this? We had a deal. We had a deal that if you extend me, if we have children, all our children are going to be able to do this thing. Okay, so an abstract class, it builds in like a promise. It builds in a set of rules with the class. Like, if you're going to extend me, you have to do this. Okay, so the reason we're using an abstract class in this situation is our validators, each one of our validators is going to be a class of its own that will extend, and we'll get into this in a second, but it will extend this custom validator, this abstract class. And when it extends it, we are going to provide the method in the child that does the work, that tells it, is it, if it's, for example, the first one we're going to build is a minimum character validator. Well, it's going to take the information and it's going to say, hey, does this little bit of input that they sent me, is it a minimum of 6 characters long? If it's not, then I'm going to return false. If it is, I'm going to return true. And we don't want to have to write the logic out that everything else that it needs to do, because it's going to have a lot of code, and each one of these validators is going to be the same. And remember what I said, we don't repeat our code. We do our very best to not repeat code. If you find yourself copying and pasting code, you're doing something wrong. Okay, so that's what this abstract class is going to allow us to do. If you're a little confused right now about that, don't worry about it, because we're going to build this, and I think I can make it clear as we build it what I'm doing. So please keep asking questions. I love questions. Here we go. So the thing is let's go ahead and, before I build out this code inside of here, I'm going to save this. I'm going to create our next file just to show you what we're going to do here. I'm going to call this min validator. I'm going to use the word validator on each one of these files. Okay, so now we have 2 files inside our validators directory, one called custom validator, the other one called min validator. Okay, so if inside the min validator, what we're going to do here is we're going to just declare this class min validator. I have a new keyboard too, so I can't type on it for some reason. But here's where the magic happens. This extends custom validator. Okay, all of our validators are going to extend our custom validator. Okay, so this is going to inherit. This is a child class. Custom validator is our parent class. So the minimum validator is going to inherit anything that we put in our custom validator. So let me show. What's the best way? It's gonna be a long time before we can actually test what this is doing. So we need to get some code down and get something working on the screen so that we can try it. But here, okay. So what we want to do is start with our custom validator, and the custom validator is going to be constructed. We want our constructor to happen in the custom validator. Okay, so let's in order to do a constructor, there's no difference here. It's just public function 2 underscores construct. Okay, and then what we need to do is we're going to pass 2 parameters into this. Okay, the first parameter is going to be our model, and our second parameter is just going to be an array called params. And by default, actually, you know what? We're not going to allow that to be an empty. You have to pass in params. We're going to do some cool stuff with that. All right, so any validator, when we instantiate the object from the class, which basically just means when we use that blueprint to build our object, that's called instantiation. Okay, so we're building an object from our class. Okay, when that happens, this construct method is what does it. Okay, actually, the construct method doesn't do it. You can do it without a construct method, but construct runs as soon while the object is being created. Okay, so anytime you say, hey, new custom validator, it's going to run this construct method already. It's a magic method. In PHP, anything that starts, generally speaking, anything that starts with 2 underscores is a magic method. So this is going to be called upon instantiation of the custom validator. You all with me so far? All right. So, and I know you may not understand just yet, but here's the other thing we're going to do. We when this gets constructed, this model that's being passed in is actually going to be one of these models. Okay, it's an object instantiated from one of these models. We're going to pass that into the validator, so it's going to have access to everything that the model has. So what we need to do is we need to set up a protected property here. So we're going to say protected, and then I like to do my protected properties starting with a single underscore, and so it's just going to be model. Okay, so we have a protected model, and so we need to set that up. So inside of our constructor, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say this model is equal to model. All right, so what's going to happen is we're passing in our, say, our user's model, our user's object. And so just imagine this is your logged in user. So when we construct our validator, we're passing in our logged in user's object. Then we're going to set that as a property inside of our custom validator so that we can use it anywhere else in the validator. And because we're going to extend this will also be available to us in any child class. So if I extended this right here, this class automatically has access to that model. Okay, so that's how that works. The next thing that we want to do is the way that this is going to work. Let me just show you an example of how we're going to use this thing. So inside of our model, to run a piece of validation, the way I want it to work is the model is going to have a function called run validation. Okay, so it's going to look like this, run validation, and this, what we're going to do is we're going to pass in our validator. And in order to do that, we're just going to instantiate it right in line. So we're going to say new min validator. And then we're going to pass in that object. So inside of that model, it's just going to be this. This right here will actually be this model param that gets loaded. The next thing that we're going to load in is an array that's going to have a field. So the field might be username, okay? And then it's going to have a message, and it's going to be something like your username must be 6 characters. Okay, so that's how this is going to work, and this isn't actually going to stay here. I'm just showing you how we're going to use this later so that it makes sense what we're doing with this params right here. Okay. So the other thing that in this situation, we're also going to have something called a rule, and that is going to set our minimum value. So in this case, we're just going to say like that, 6. Okay. If you're a little confused, just keep watching where it's going to clear up. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to take these params, which is going to be this array right here, and we need to load it into some properties that can be accessed. Okay, this time we're going to use public properties instead of protected ones. And so the first thing that we want to do is we're going to set one called success, and by default success is going to be equal sorry, I can't type on this keyboard. It's going to be equal to true. The next thing that we want to set up is a public property called message, and by default it's just going to be an empty string, and we're given these defaults so that we can use it outright. By default, if a validator runs, if you don't pass anything or anything, we just want the default value to be true, that it passes. Okay, we're going to get into logic on why, but I'll show you. The next thing that we need to store here is a field, and that one we'll just leave as null, so we're not going to set that a default on that. And we're also going to set up rule. Okay, that's all the properties that this is going to need. Now again, when we extend this class by creating a min, or these classes that extend it, so you see a min validator is going to extend custom validator. It's going to have access to all of this right here. It's going to have access to the model, and it's going to do that because it's protected. It's not private. If I would set that to private, then even our child classes wouldn't have access to this. But because it's protected, then that means only the parent and the children of that parent have access to models. So nothing else in our code will have access to this unless it extends this class. Public, these properties anywhere in our code has access to these, and they can actually manipulate those. So if you need to protect your properties from being manipulated by other bits of code, and by the way, by extension, when I say that, it also means your code is going to be protected from yourself in the future when you don't remember how you did something. It's also going to mean that your code's protected from other developers who may work with you on the code that you're writing. That's the big deal about writing public or protected or private on these, is allows us to create built-in permissions on what can be accessed and where. Okay. The other thing that's really cool that we can do with PHP is, you know how when you screw something up and you try to use the page, there's an exception. It's basically an error, and it displays something to the screen. And we want to set these up in a way that the future us, when we don't remember how we wrote this any longer, we try to use it, and if we don't use it correctly, if we don't pass it the things it needs, it's going to error out. But most importantly, we want to write our error messages in a way that's going to remind us, oh yeah, you need to add a field to that. It's not going to work without a field, you dummy. So we want to kind of do that sort of thing. So I'm going to show you how to do that, because right now on this constructor function, we're going to make sure that we pass a field so they can populate field. We're going to make sure that it has a message. This is going to be required. And we're going to make sure also, and also very importantly, that the field that they pass exists on the model that they passed in. So for example, if I pass in my logged in user into this validator, I want to make sure that the field that I passed into that I'm going to try to validate on actually exists on the username. So if there's a property like, I don't know, a stupid property like, I don't know, man, like blades of grass or something stupid that doesn't go with a user, we're going to also display an error on that. So the way that we do that is we're going to add some if statements here. And we're basically, the first thing I want to check is, let's check to make sure that they added a field. So make sure the field exists. Okay, man, I hate when that happens. Field this. All right. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to do an if statement, simple if statement. So we're going to say if this params array, if it doesn't include a field's element in that array, then there's a problem. Okay. So basically, what we're saying is if if not array key exists. So if they didn't include this in the array, so we're using this as a built-in PHP function. Array key exists. So basically, we're searching for if they didn't include field in the params array, then we're gonna throw an exception. Okay, and throw an exception just means we're gonna create an error that we're gonna display. Okay, so the way that you do that in PHP is you say throw new exception. All right. PHP is really nice, and they give us some stuff out of the box that we can use. And so what we're throwing is a message that we can tell ourselves, hey, dummy, you forgot to include a field in your params array. So I'm just going to think like a developer, and this is not something we want ever to be shown to people who visit our sites. This is as we're programming and developing, this is going to be shown. So the exception we want to be shown here is, let's see, you must include a field element in the params array. That's just something for us to remind that, hey, you have to have this field passed in, or there's a problem. So else, what we're going to do here is else, if they did include it, then we need to populate the field right here into this public property. So the way we do that, we just say this field is going to be equal to params field. All right. So that's it. We're going to kind of use that as a template here. So we're going to say, hey, next what we want to do is we want to make sure that the field actually exists on the model. Okay, so make sure field exists in model. This is going to make a lot of sense when we use it, guys. So so we're going to say if not property exists. So if this property doesn't exist, this is another built-in PHP function that we can check an object if a property exists in an object. And so what's kind of weird about this one is where the array key exists method, it takes the needle and then the haystack. So you're searching for a needle in the haystack. This one's kind of backwards, which I think is odd that PHP did it this way, but I'm glad they at least gave me this function to use. So what we're going to say is, does the well, I'm sorry, I told you it's opposite, and then I started putting in the wrong spot. So what we want to do is we want to say the object we're checking is the model that they passed in, and the key that we're checking, the property that we're checking inside that model is field. So if that doesn't exist, then we're going to throw an exception, and this time we're going to give it an exception of maybe the field does not belong to the model. I don't know. Maybe there's a better error message. Hard to think of this stuff on the fly as I'm talking to you guys and type at the same time on a new keyboard. So if it exists, then we're good to go. So then we're not going to throw an exception. We actually need to actually set it up. Actually, wait a minute. There's no else on that one because we're just checking if it exists on the model. If it is, good. Let's just move on. We don't need to set anything else up. We've already set the field up, and we've already set the model up right here. The model gets set there. The field gets set here. Now we need to check the last little bit of information that we're making sure they send us is a message. This is a message that's going to be displayed if the validation doesn't pass. And so we need to make sure that they pass that in to the validator to make sure that we have something to pass back and say, hey, buddy, enter your username. So the way we do that is make sure the message exists in the params array. So this is going to be really similar to up above. What we're going to do is we're going to say if, you know what, we can just copy that code. And I know I told you don't copy and paste code, but we're changing it so it's not the same code. It just makes it a little bit easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if the key message, if that doesn't exist in the params, then we're going to say, hey, you must include message element in the params array. Else, if they did include that, or if we included it, then we're good to go with that. So we're going to say this message is equal to params message. Okay. I know this is a little dry so far, guys. Just trust me, this is going to be awesome. I'm pretty proud of this validator thing that we're building now. It's so fun to use. Once it's built, and then you're building a form, it's so fast. It's so fast and so awesome. It really shines on the framework part of it. I'm pretty excited. So then the last thing that we need to do is we're not gonna throw an exception here, but we do want to check if array key exists. Wow. If the array key, man, stupid keyboard. Actually, you know what the problem is? There's an error between the keyboard and the seat. All right, so if the array key exists, rule, and if that exists inside of params, then what we want to do is we want to say this rule is equal to params rule. All right. So now, guys, we are really close to being done with this abstract class, and then we're going to do some fun stuff. Okay, so basically, now we're actually going to try to finish constructing this thing, and actually, if this is all set up correctly, we actually just need to run the validation. So it's just going to instantiate it and immediately run a method on it if everything's set up correct. So the way that we can do that is with the try-catch blocks. Okay, so a try-catch block, you just type try and then it's open and close curly braces, and then the catch part of it gets a param, and that param is going to be exception. Help if I can spell it. Exception, and then E, which will be the error object. And so what we're doing, what a try-catch block does is we're gonna, if there's any exceptions that get thrown, this is gonna catch that exception, and then we're gonna display that to the screen. If there's no exceptions, it's gonna run the code that's in the try block. Okay. So the way that works is we're going to echo a message to the screen. And we're just going to say validation exception, and then we'll give it some context. So we're going to tell it what the actual class that threw the exception is, so that they know exactly what class broke it. Okay, we know in the future exactly what class breaks it. So PHP gives us a really cool function called get class. All right, this is going to print to the screen the name of the class that it's on, that's running this. So even if it's, say it's the min validator later, it'll print min validator there, even though we're writing this in the parent class. That's what's cool about this function, is it knows where it's coming from. Okay. So then what we're going to do is we're going to concatenate on a colon, a space, and then concatenate on the actual error message. And to do that, we just reference the E object right here, and then the method that's called on that is called get message. All right. So I know that what you're thinking. You're like, man, what the heck? Maybe all of you guys have left by now, because this was a little weird. But you just have to trust me that this is going to be cool. So you create the custom validator. It runs this construct method. And then what we want, if everything's set up correctly, we've gone through all of our validation for our validator, then what we want to do is we want to run our function that doesn't exist yet. Also, they're generally called methods, but if you say function, it's just a method is a function, but it's a method that's packaged inside of an object. Okay. So then what we're going to call that is run validation. Okay. And actually, what we want to do is not only run that, we need to set this right here is going to return true or false, and we need to update this success value so we know if it passes validation or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this success is equal to this run validation. Okay, so it's going to run the validation function, and then it's going to set success equal to that. So I know what you're thinking. What the heck is the run validation function? This is why we needed the abstract class. So let's just get rid of this line here. This was just here for reference. That's not actually part of this class. So now we need to create a new method that we can call, and we want this method to be a public function because we're going to be calling this from our other models. So the public function, and it's going to be run validation, and then this is what actually does all the logic. Run validation does all the logic to know if the validator passes or fails. So this parent class is pretty much done, with the exception of I'm not going to write any logic inside here. This isn't going to do anything. This is why we needed this to become an abstract class, because what we're going to do is we're going to say abstract public function run validation. And you don't need the curly braces because we don't have any, there's not a body to that function. It's just telling it, again, abstract is just a promise. It's just telling whatever classes that we extend, can I increase a bit the video resolution? Code is very confused typing. Oh, that is a bummer. I actually can't change the resolution while I'm on the stream. Maybe I can increase the font size. I don't know if that'll help. Also, the other thing I want to do is I'm going to go to my preferences here in Atom, and there should be a preference that allows me to scroll past the end of the file. I'm going to turn that on because that might help too. What that does is this file ends on line 42, but now I can scroll so that this is up further on the screen. JJ, does that help at all, increasing that font size? You guys let me know if you can see. There are some challenges with doing this live that don't exist when I'm recording. When I'm recording, my quality can be as good as I can make it. Okay, well, I didn't get any comments from you guys if that helped or not, so I'm gonna hope that it did. The resolution could also be on your guys' end if your internet connection is slow. Try to watch this on a bigger screen so that it's big for you, and then hopefully your internet connection can handle 720p. That's one of the reasons that I lowered the resolution to 720 instead of 1080, is because some people were in areas with internet connections that couldn't stream 1080p quick enough. All right. So we have an abstract public function, and what that does is tells all of our child classes, hey man, if you're gonna extend me, if you're gonna be my child, you have to run validation. That's just the rule. If you're my child, you live in this house, you're running validation. Okay, so that's what that means. So let's just go ahead now and I'm not going to put a run validation method in here so that you can see what happens, okay? And that'll make a little bit more sense what the abstract class is doing. But first, we have to do something kind of annoying, which is change our autoloader a little bit. We don't have to change it, we have to add to it. And that's because we added this validators directory, and we don't if you look inside of our index.php file where our autoloader is loaded, we don't actually check inside that directory, so this wouldn't be auto-loaded. We'd have to require this anytime we're going to use it, and I don't want to have to require that. So what I want to do is we want to, if we're going to touch this thing, let's add both spots, because in the future, once the framework is done, you don't really want to touch core that much, right? So when you add stuff, you want your stuff to be added inside of app. So all your stuff for your app you're building needs to be in this app directory. Everything else is the framework, right? So you don't want to touch this stuff. You want to just be able to use that in other projects, okay? And your stuff for this particular app you're building is inside of app. So we're going to add a new directory there as well. And we're going to call that custom_validators. And this is where you can personally add your own validators that extend the custom validator here, okay? So if you want to add a validator later, something that we don't build here tonight, say like you want to validate in a specific way a phone number or something like that, you can create a custom validator that extends the class we just built, and rest assured that if you do it wrong, you're going to get an error message because we've added that stuff. But you're going to learn, because we're going to go through quite a few of these validators tonight, you're going to learn really quick how to build a validator. So you're going to feel pretty comfortable. Actually, a validator, the way we're building this, all it needs to do is return true or false. So anything you want to do inside that validator, as long as you return true or false, you're good to go. It's going to work, okay? So, so what we want to do is inside of index.php, we're just going to add right here to this autoload method, and we're going to say else if, and here we're going to say file exists. And what we're looking for here is we actually want to look and see if the file exists inside your custom validator first, in case you name your custom validator the same as one of, let's say for instance, you don't like my min validator we built tonight, the minimum validator, you want to do it differently. Then you can actually add your own min validator to your custom validators, and it'll load that instead of mine. Okay, so that's why we're going to put this one first. But what we're going to look for is we're looking for in the app directory, and then dang it, keyboard, do it. And then I just blame the keyboard because I can't type. Just joking. This is way different than my Mac keyboard. So what we want to look at inside the app directory, we created that directory called custom validators. Okay, and then we're looking for the class name, and then .php. Okay, so if that file exists, then require it. Okay, so what we're going to just say is require, and we don't want to require it if it's already been required somehow. So we're going to require once, and then we're just going to copy this little bit right here. All right, so if that happens to land in your custom validators, it's going to load it. So when you build a custom validator later, you just add it in this directory, the same as we're going to be adding all the other ones here in the validators directory. The next thing I want to do is I'm actually just going to copy this and paste it, and then we're just going to change a few things. Let's see, so this one is actually in core. I should have copied a different one, but whatever. So it's going to not live in app, it's going to live in core, and then inside of a directory called validators. I'll replace all this here. copy this one. All right. So what it's going to do essentially in this autoloader is it's going to first look in your custom validators directory. If it doesn't exist there, it's going to look inside this other validators. If it exists there, it's going to load it. It's going to require it one time. All right, that's all we need to do in the index.php to make this work. So I'm going to close that. And then what we're going to do is let's build out the min. Well, no, let's try to use this, and I'll show you why the validator sucked to begin with. So inside our register, if you go to app controllers, register controller, and let's look for our register action. Look at this thing. Okay, so this is our register action, and in order to validate before, we did all this stuff to validate all of our fields. We had this huge array right here, and then we said, hey, if validation passes, if validation passes, then we did our important stuff, like we registered the new user, right? Really, all we want to live in our action is this stuff. All this other stuff, we don't really want, it doesn't really belong in the register action. It actually belongs in the model because it has to do with creating a new object in that table. So we need to make it live there. So what we're going to do is open up models and then users. And then, man, this is so hard to like show you guys this refactor because there's so many files that we're gonna have to touch to make this work. But let's just make it work. All right. So underneath the construct, the way that I want this to work is I want to say, hey, public function validator. And then I want this to run when I save. Anytime I save a user, I want this validator to run. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create some cool stuff that automatically runs validation every time we try to create a new user with our models. Okay, so we're not going to have to like remember to add validation in every single place in our application that creates a user. So say we're going to have multiple places in this application that creates users. One of them being the front end. If someone decides to create an account, that's going to create a user. Another place would be in the back end area if we want to add an employee or something like that who can add new products. That's going to create a user. So there's all these different places that we would have to add validation. Instead, we can actually use this public function validator after we finish what we're doing, and anything we put in here will just run. So let me show you what that looks like. What we're going to do here is we're going to say this run validation, and then remember the way that we wanted this to look is, let's see, what's a good one to run? Let's work on username, I guess, is fine. So what we want to do is we're going to check our username stuff right here. Username validation, okay? And the first one we're going to start with, we're going to make sure that their username is at least, I don't know, 6 characters or something, okay? So we'll use our validator. We're going to be creating the minimum validator to check if it's 6 characters or not. So what we're going to say is this run validation, and inside there we're going to instantiate the new validator. So we're going to say new min validator, okay? And then we're going to pass in this, which would be the user's object, because we're in that's the space that we're in. So this is the user's model, so it's going to pass the user object in, which will have all the properties and methods that this has. And then our params array is going to look like this. We're going to say field. Well, the field that I want to validate is going to be username. And then the rule is I want it to be 6 characters. Okay? And then the last thing is our message. And we want to say, for our message, this is our custom message that's going to be passed back to the form. And this is just going to say your username must be at least 6 characters. Okay? That's how we're going to use this. And we're just going to keep build. So any sort of validation that needs to happen is just going to happen inside. The only place we're going to have to worry about it is inside this validator on the model. Then anytime we build a new user, it's going to run this validation and say, yep, it passes, add it to the database, or no, it doesn't, send back these messages to the form to be consumed by the form and then presented to the user. All right. So obviously this isn't going to work out of the box because validator, it has no way of running this validator function. We don't have anything that tells it to run that. So what we need to do in the framework end of this is we actually need to add that to our model. So let's inside core, I'm going to open up the model. This is the parent class that all of our models are built from. So if you look at users extends model. So that's this right here. So what we're going to do here is this making sense, guys? Is this good? Are you guys learning anything? Hopefully you're learning a little bit of object-oriented programming. And object-oriented programming shouldn't be scary to you. Just dive in and get your hands dirty. Don't be like me. I was scared of it for like years. I don't know. I have no clue why now. It's like it was crippling to me. Anytime I was looking at object-oriented programming code, I was like, what is this? What are these arrows and stuff? All right, so we're inside of the model here. And check, make sure we haven't died. All right, guys, we are not died. We are alive. Still. Barely. We are alive. Okay, hopefully I'm not going too fast, but we need inside this model, ultimately what we want to happen is when we run this save function, we want to run validation first, and only if validation passes will we actually insert or update that record. So anytime we use the save method, it needs to run validation. Okay, so what we're going to do here is first of all, we need to stub out run validation inside this parent class, because in case we have any models that we're not running validation on, we don't want it to fail when we try to save. So in order to do that, all we're going to do is say public function, and then it's just going to be run validation. And this method, all we're going to do is return true. Okay. Actually, we don't need, yeah, we'll just do that. We're just going to say run return true. That's all we need to do in the parent class. And then what we need to do up here is we're going to create a variable called passes, and we'll just say this run validation. Okay, and then we need to add a new if statement. We're going to say if passes, this, remember, run validation is going to return a boolean. It's going to return true or false. So if it passes, then we're going to do all of this stuff. Let me just cut that and paste it right here inside that if statement. And then let me just double check, make sure I'm not missing something here on my own. Oh, you know what? I'm so stupid. Okay. Remember, okay, I would have caught this in a second, but inside of our users, when we call this validator, the validator itself is actually going to it's going to pass in here. Let me show you. So run validation is actually going to pass in validator like this. Okay, and then wow, so I do actually need to do a lot of stuff in the parents. The one that I thought of that we needed to stub out looks like this. So it's similar, but it's the validator itself, public function validator. And that is gonna, we don't even need a body on this, so we're just gonna put it here so that it exists. Okay, and the reason we're doing that is we're going to put in the user's model right here. See this validator? We need that to exist on the parent, basically. In case we create a model that doesn't have it, we need something there so it doesn't error out. Okay, then we need a run validation function that the parameter that's being passed into it is the actual validator. See this? So we passed a parameter into there, and that's the validator. And the validator itself is going to start out kind of simple, but later we're going to do our cross-site request forgery check there too. So it's going to get a little bit, a little complex and not too bad. I think we can just kind of go through it as we build it. So I was wrong about returning true here. So this validation, it gets that validator passed right into it in the child classes. Steve says, I love you so much, man. I'm always ready to like whatever you post. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Actually, liking my stuff helps me. If you guys, it helps other people find me too, because YouTube likes people who gets likes. So I'm actually really thankful for all you guys, because although I don't have a huge amount of subscribers, I think I have like 1,700 or something. My like versus dislike ratio is pretty high. So I get like 97-98% likes and like 3% dislike. And so YouTube sees that and they're like, oh, this guy must not suck too bad because his subscribers like him. And so it helps me when you guys do that. So thank you very much for liking my stuff. But hopefully, more importantly, that you actually like the code that we generate together and want to use it. All right. I know I'm talking a lot. I really want to get through this refactor so we can build more of our e-commerce site. But you're going to be really happy we did this. All right. Once it's all done and then we use it, it's so simple. Man, it's beautiful. And it's like, so easy to use. That's why I like it a lot more than the other validate method that we built during the course. I don't even know why I built it. So my wife went out of town and I was just sitting there on the couch. My kids went to sleep and I was like, I hate that validator class. And then I just stayed up until like 3 in the morning figuring all this stuff out that we're doing together now. Yeah. But anyways, okay, so what we need to do is we're gonna say, let's see. Let me just double check save function because I wanna explain this right. Oh man, I forgot some I forgot some important stuff here. This is why I got messed up. So in the parent model, we actually need to add some new properties here because we want the model itself. So say it's the user's model object. We want that object itself to actually contain the error, whether it passes or fails, and we also want to store that message on there. So we're going to keep like an array of messages, and then if we say in our controller action, we say, hey, save this user, we run the save method and it fails, then we can print out right from here, from our users thing, without doing any sort of weird stuff. It'll just exist here. So let me see. This is also going to be protected method, so we're just going to add it to this line here. So what we need here is two new properties, and I like to start my protected and private with underscores. It's not necessary that you do that though if you hate it. It's just easier in the code to see later when I use them that it's private or protected if it starts with an underscore. So we want it to validate, and I'm going to set that default to true. Okay, so the validates, does it validate or does it not validate? So by default it is going to. So if they don't run a validation, it'll just save it to the database. Okay. The other thing is, I told you we want to store the validation errors, and that is just going to be an empty array. And so when you first instantiate the model, whatever model it is, say like the user's model, and then you go to save something, if you don't create that validator and then pass some validators down to it, it's just going to validate to true every single time you go to save it. Okay. Okay, so let me get back to this save function. So in our save function, we're not going to do this stupid thing with passes like that. We'll leave our if statement, but we're going to change that. So what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to set up is this validator. We're going to call that method. So when the save method gets called, it's going to call this validator method, okay? Which in our case, we're not just using the model directly, we're using extended classes. So it's going to run the validator on the extended class if it exists, okay? So that's the first thing that happens. It runs a validator, which will run, so like if you look in our users, we have validator. So this, anytime we do user save, it runs this function now. It does run validation every single time we use save now. Okay, so that's cool. That's what we want to happen. We want that validator to run. And then we actually have, in this if statement, we have access to if this validates. So if it validates, then we want to do all this insert or update stuff, okay? So if it validates, and also we don't even really need to set up these fields if it doesn't validate. So we can save ourselves a little bit of headroom there, a little bit of performance boost by only running this fields thing if we need to, because if it doesn't validate, then that's important to know. What happens if it doesn't validate? Well, what we're going to do now is on the save function, if it doesn't validate, we're going to return false. Okay? So that's it. So we run the save method, it runs a validator. If it validates, if that is true, then it's going to do all of our stuff that we normally did inside of the save function. Else, it's going to jump in and return false. So let's figure out our validator function here. Kind of looking through. I have some stuff for the cross-site request forgery, which I think we're going to leave that out for now. Come back to. Okay, so the way it works is, remember we passed validator in. So I want to set, just for ease of use, I want to set up something, I'm just going to call it key. And this key is going to actually be the field name. So I'm just going to say validator. Remember that on the validator we had the field, okay? So in our case here, in the users, that field is going to be the username, okay? So back in the model, it's going to say, hey, this key is going to actually get set to username. That's what that's doing. And then what we want to do is we want to say if not validate, or if not this validates. That was actually a protected method property. If it doesn't validate, then what we want to do is, damn it, screwing it up again. If not validator, and then that had something called success. So if you look in the custom validator, there's success right here, okay? And you'll see what happens to that. But if this doesn't happen, so if that's false, what happens to when we run validation if it's false? Then we actually need to set this validates equal to false. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to say this error messages, or validation errors, is what we called it. This validation, I don't like the underscore, I'm going to change that. So this validation errors, and then we're going to add to that array, and we're going to add the key. So basically what's going to happen is, one second, let me finish my thought here so I can, it's hard to type and talk at the same time. That's why I end up so many typos while I'm talking, because I might type what I'm saying or whatever. So this validation errors key, remember key in this instance is going to be username. So if this is false, it's going to set our model and say, hey man, this didn't pass. So inside of users, that validates property we set will be that this is what's going to set that to false. And then we're going to add to our validation errors our key. It's going to be added to the array, and it's going to be field will be the element or the key of the array, and then the value of that key in the array will be the message from the validator. So anytime it fails, it adds to the array. Later we can consume that in our form and say, hey, the username had a error on that, and then we can make the username box red and then put the message either underneath it or up above in our form errors thing. And I'll show you that stuff too. That's not difficult. So that's what we're going to do there. We don't need to do anything if it passes because it already is set to true and with empty validation error. So we only need to do that if it fails validation. Okay. Let me see. Oh, I said I was going to rename this. We don't get any errors. Ooh. Let me put a bunch of R's there. Pirate. All right. Get a drink of water. The energy drink is just not hydrating me. All right. We're gonna have to add a few more methods and stuff, but we're getting really close to being able to test this out. Okay. The next thing that we want to do, let me just check my code here because I think two small methods we need to add to this thing. I just don't know if we should do it right now. I want to make this as clear as possible while we're doing it. Yeah, I think we'll hold off on these. So now let's actually write our minimum validator, which is super simple. Let me show you how easy it is now that we've written this to go in and create a new validator. Are you ready? It's only a couple lines long. So go back to our, actually I wanted to show you guys the error message. So before we do that, let's try it. So I got a syntax error, unexpected here on model line 68. So let's go and look at that. Model line 68. That should have been an equal. All right, that's a different error message than what I wanted to show you. Okay, see if I have any comments real quick. So we're here on the register page. If I hit register, the reason these are showing up right now is because we still have all that old stuff going. So let's stop that from working right now. Let's go to our register controller. We have all this. Okay. So in our register controller, I'm going to leave this stuff just for reference, but we're going to get rid of this. And I don't care about this validation pass stuff anymore. Just get rid of that. And then what I want to do is we're actually just going to say new user assign post, and then we're just going to say new user, save. We don't need to do this. I'm gonna get rid of that method. So here we're we only want to redirect if this works. So we can actually wrap an if statement around this and just say if, and then instead of like checking anything, we could just take this, put it inside of this check. Oh my gosh. The Mac, the control button. So I'm usually used to using command. So now I obviously can't copy and paste very easily with this. All right, so there we go. So here, what's gonna happen? We're gonna get rid of all of this craziness, and then it's just gonna try to run it. It's gonna set up a new user, and it's going to assign host, run the save method, and the save method, remember, it calls validator. So this actually won't. This will come back as false. Okay. The other thing that I need to do is let's take this outside of this post thing. So the new user, we're going to create that at the very top of this method. And then we actually can get rid of this validation equals new validate. We don't need that anymore. We're actually not going to need this post values anymore. I'm going to show you why in a minute. So we're going to clean this up quite a bit. I just don't want to get rid of this stuff yet because I need this for reference when we're building. Well, we're going to get rid of all of this. I'm just going to leave it commented out. So this whole register action is going to go down to a few lines of code now. All right. So I guess this isn't going to work. So what we want to do is pass new user down to our view. So I'm just going to say new user. I'll show you why in a second. And then our display errors are going to be something different now. For now, well, screw it. Let's go ahead and do this now too. Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the refactor. So the other reason I didn't like this validate class, the original one, is because it really doesn't make sense for this stupid thing to generate a bunch of HTML and dump it on the screen. I don't like that. And so what we're going to do, what makes more sense since we're dealing with forms when we're displaying those errors, is that should actually probably live in our form helpers. Okay, so inside of our form helpers, we're not going to do a lot of craziness because we're just going to copy from here. I'm going to copy this whole method, and then inside of form helpers, we're going to add it in here. Okay, and then it's going to change a little bit. It's going to be a lot easier. So this right here, we're going to pass it the errors into it. And then has errors just needs to be, instead of this errors, we just change that to errors. And then I want to add a div with a class equal to form errors. And then at the end of this UL, we're going to close that div. And then we're going to simplify this a lot. So in this for each right here, instead of looking at this errors, we're looking at the errors that are passed in. And then we know that this is going to be an array. So we can just get rid of this whole else. And actually, we're actually going to get rid of this whole if statement. So simplifying code, which is always good. And then this is actually going to be remember when I told you we're setting the key of that equal to the field? It's actually going to be the errors field and then the error. Okay. So right here, this is going to be the actual error. And so that will be error. And then our JavaScript that will find the thing and make it red is going to be field. All right. So that's our new display errors, and that lives in the form helpers, which I think is a way nicer place to put it. Okay. So now, instead of returning this validation display errors, what we're going to do is we're just going to do fh for form helpers, and then we need to run display errors like that. And then remember in our display, we passed in the errors as an array. And so what needs to be passed in is new user. Second. Let me see. I think what I did was I might have. This is where we needed that other little thing. This is when all right. Yeah. So we need to create get error messages. That's a method we're going to create. And that's on this new user. So we need to add that to our model. This is that really small function. Now, the reason we had to do this is because if you look inside the model, remember we set validation errors as a protected property. So I can't just grab those out willy-nilly wherever I want. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a getter, which is really simple. It's just going to be a public function, and it's going to be get what did I call that? Errors? Get error messages. All right. And all this is going to do is return this validate underscore validation errors. Okay, so it's just a public method to access a protected property. Okay. So get error messages. So let's go back to our register controller. Make that get error messages. And then, so now our display errors are going to be from the form helpers. Okay. No, not how we're doing it. The controller does not do it that way. The controller is just going to pass this down to the view. The view is going to take these error messages and display it with the form helpers. Let's open up the view now. So the view is our actual HTML form. We go to register. This is the code for that, which we're going to simplify this crap too. So our form errors, we did put them right here, but now what we can do is get rid of all of this and this. Let me show you how easy it is now to do this. So now we just say form helpers display errors. Make sure that's what we called it. Yep, display errors. So our display errors is going to take in our errors, which was this display errors. That's it. So this right here is going to display our error messages in our form. All right. So let's go now and sure I got some problems, of course. commented out the if statement, which is this closing tag right there. So it complained about this line, but it was actually this closing tag. It was like, there's an extra closing tag there, retard. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. If that offends you, I'm sorry. So here's a deprecated non-static method, fh_displayers, and that is because when I added this to the form helpers, I forgot to make this a static function. So all we need to do is add static right there. Fresh. All right, so now we're all good, except for, you see all of our notices inside of our form fields? Like, hey man, what happened to the register stuff, right? And that is because we are simplifying things, and we might as well just go ahead and rewrite this register form. See how long this is? We don't need it to be that long. It can be a lot simpler because we have our new form helper stuff. So we're going to say form helper and input block. And if you need to reference that, you can open up the form helpers. So we have this input block right here. So the type on this is going to be text, and then the label will be first name, and then the value, and this is the reason it's mad at us. Actually, did I do? It goes type, label, then name, then value. So the type, this is going to actually be f name. So this is the ID and the name of the field. The next thing that we need is the actual value. And so this is actually going to be this new user f name. Okay. And then our input is going to have a class of form control. And I think that's good enough. Double check my. Oh, we can also give it a class of input small to make it look a little nicer. And then our wrapper is going to have a class equal to form group. So when we're building forms out in the future, instead of doing all this nonsense, we can just get rid of all this now and put that. And so now I'm just going to copy and paste this a couple times. And so this one's going to get rid of last name. So the last name, this becomes L name, becomes L name. And then we can delete all this. Then email. We're going to change it. Actually, I'm going to leave that as text for now. I'll show you why. We're going to change it to email later. But this is going to be email. Bunch of email. We get rid of this. Keep on keeping on, guys. Paste again. This time, let's do username. Then we can get rid of all of this. Our form's starting to get little. And then this one is going to be a type of password because we want it to be hidden. Then we're just going to say password. Password. All right, and then we can get rid of our password here now. Then I'm going to copy this one. I have to type password so many times. And then this one's going to be confirm. And I just typed password when I didn't need to. And then the name's going to be confirm here. Git confirm. I'll show you why we have to do that in a minute. Let's see. Get rid of that. And then I'm going to add one more. And we're just going to do fh submit block. That one, button text and then input and div. Okay, the button text, this was register. Then the input's going to have a class. We're going to make that equal to button primary and button large. And for our div, we're just going to give that a class of text right. All right, now I can get rid of all of this junk. And close my PHP tags there. I was going to complain. All right, so now our form is looking a lot nicer. We have our cross-site request forgery input, which we're going to change a little bit. Actually, we're not changing that at all, but we have to change the way it works. And then we have display errors, and then our inputs and our submit block. Let's just make sure that loaded correctly now. We should get rid of all these little errors except for one. And that happened because of that get confirm method. We don't have that built yet. So that's going to be super simple. Inside the users model, we're going to add a, I think I added it as a protected. It could be private. Yeah, we'll just make that private. That makes sense anyway. So this is going to be confirm, and we're going to set that equal to, well, it can be null. That's fine. So now, since this is private, that's why we need the getter. So this is also going to be very, very simple. We're just going to add a public function called get confirm. And then in the get confirm, we're just going to return that private property. Sorry, as I'm wearing down, I'm getting tired and it's hard to explain things. But if you guys need to ask questions, please do so. But basically, we're setting up confirm on the user's model as a private method because this doesn't exist. It can't be public because it doesn't exist in the database. This is just an additional field that we're using to verify that they've typed in their password correctly. All right, so now let's see what happens. All right, so now we don't have any more of those weird errors inside of here. Go ahead and click register. All right, so we have an error here, and our error is that our min validator does not exist, and so our min validator doesn't exist, or it's not found. So let's figure out why. So let's go back now to our users. It's what's calling it is our users on line 29. That's probably not where the error is going to be though. See, look at that again. Not found in app models. The line 29 invalidator. Here's our invalidator. What exists? Let's double check our exists for validator. Oh, that's probably the problem right there. doesn't have, I didn't include the directory separator. And I didn't do it here either. You guys probably caught that. You guys are a lot smarter than me. Add it here. Not there. Here, where it's supposed to be. Alright. That should fix it, unless I messed something else up, which I probably did. Alright, this is what I wanted to show you guys. Perfect. This fatal error is exactly why we created the abstract class. Okay? The abstract class, it says, so read it. The class min validator contains one abstract method and must therefore be declared abstract or implement the remaining methods. So it's saying that we haven't implemented the method run validation. Okay? And that's because if you look at our minimum validator here, we don't have a method called run validation. So what this is going to do now is force us to always have that class, or we're going to get that message. So let's do that real quick. And then I'm going to also show you, before we move too quickly, I want to show you the error messages that happen when we don't include stuff we're supposed to during validation. Okay? So we're coming full circle now, finally about done with this, with you know, the hard part of this refactor, and the rest of it's real easy. So the validator here is going to be this. We need to add, it was complaining that it didn't have the function run validation. So we just need to add it. Okay, so it's super simple here. The run validation method is just going to say, hey, does it pass? And we're just going to set this equal to so the way PHP has a built-in function called string length, and string len is short for string length, but developers are lazy, and so we need to check if the string length is if it's greater than or equal to our rule that we passed in. So we passed in, if you look at our users here, we passed in, our rule was 6. So if it's 6, then it passes. So we need to do that. So in order to do this, remember that when you extend a class, we have access to everything that the parent has access to. So we have access to this model. And so the way that works now is we're going to say this model, and then we're looking for the field. And so the way that the field is actually, it is actually a variable here as well. And so we're going to say this field. And this right here, this little bit, this right here is how you access, that's exactly how you access the value of a field inside of a validator. So just to make it easy, so when you come back and look at this later, we'll just put it here, this model, and then we're looking for the field. That's going to be our value. So then in our string length function, we can just use that. We're going to say if this value is greater than or equal to this rule. Remember, rule is set up when we construct so in the users model, we construct this min validator and we pass in the model user with the field and the rule. So now we have access to that here with this rule. So if value is greater than or equal to rule, then it's true because it's a minimum validator. So if that is true, we're just going to return pass. Okay, that's it. This validator's done. We're just checking if it, so let's try it. Let's go back. We shouldn't have that error message anymore. If I click register, A syntax error, unexpected run validation on line 5. That's because I forgot to type in function, the word function. Get ahead of myself. So this is one of our exceptions that we created, and it says that the field does not belong to the model. Let's go back and look at that. That means it's telling us that the user's model does not have a username property, but I can clearly see it there. So let's look here. Username. Custom validator, line 18. Look at that. Maybe I did that code here. So if not property exists, model, oh man, I'm dumb. So the field, it actually is, it comes from this field, because it actually was checking for the word field there. That actually needs to come from our field thing here, so it's username. Let me just double check that. I love that I'm making all these mistakes in front of you guys. So this is what it's really like to develop. I make mistakes all day long at work. It's cool. Nobody's like, hey man, what are you making mistakes for? All right. So all is good so far. It looks like we got the error message, so our form helper thing is working. We do have a few notices that are, we have an undefined property variable field and minimum validator. Line 6. Let's go look at that just to try to clear that up. Yeah, so I made a mistake here. Again, it's this field. So it's going to look for, the value is this model and then this field, which comes from here, which in our case will be username. Making all kinds of weird mistakes. What happens when we program all day and then I come and do this. All right, no more notices, and our validator actually works. And the reason I know it works, let's just try, let's type in a few things like that. Still the same thing. Now let's type in more than 6 characters. Hit register. This is going to be bad, but register. And nothing happened. So let's do some debugging. What the heck is going on here? Let's use our HD&D function, and let's just look at value, make sure that's correct. Fresh, and let's just do ASDF. Okay, so that's correct. That's coming back what we expect. Let's look at, let's do our dump and die here. Let's look at pass. This should come back false. Came back as an integer of 0. So integer 0 should evaluate to false. Model. All right, so let's see. Look at custom validator. So one thing we can do to try to debug this is, let me get rid of this dump and die here. Let's see what our model is actually getting back from this. So if we go to the model, looking for my run validation. So let's make sure that we have the validator, and then we'll check a few things. So let's do our dump and die validator. The rest of the validators are going to go super fast because once we have this system set up. Right. This is false. That's correct. User, we got our message and our fields correct. So it looks to me validates false. Double check method. Problem. I'm definitely missing something. Not validator success. Validates. So let's move this down a line because that looks correct. And then let's go here and let's dump and die validator there. And if it doesn't dump and die, then we're not making it into this if state. So try again. All right, so it made it into there. All right, something else is going wrong. The validation is not success. Setting this validates equal to false. So now let's do something else. Let's do, let's return this and look at the validates and the validation errors. All right, so the users, and then let's see, we have validates is set to false. It's right here. And validation errors does have an error message. So what happens post to pass? This is coming back wrong. Username set. Validates is still false. I don't see how this could be a problem, but oh my gosh, guys. I am so freaking dumb. Okay. So string length was failing, and string length was failing because I had the rest of the logic inside of that. You guys, man, you guys see those errors, jump on to give me a freaking um, comment and let me know, because that was a stupid mistake. I just spent so much time on that. Yeah. So string length, if the string length is greater than or equal to this rule, I was passing greater than or equal to this rule inside of string length. So we should be good now. Let me get rid of that dump and die quick. All right, let's test it. All right, AAS should fail, and then ASDF, longer one. Okay, so if I look at my database now and refresh on the users table, it inserted that row into our database. Not what we want, but it did validate. So if I hit delete, I'm going to get rid of that, and you can see that it didn't add the one that failed. So if I go back to register, I go back to register, and then I put something that fails validation, hit that, and just double check here, it doesn't add a row into the database, which is exactly what we want. So now we are on the fast track to finishing the validation stuff. And I'm telling you guys, I know this looks stupid. This was worth it. All this time that we just spent on this is going to speed up development so much on your sites that, man, I'm excited about it. I wouldn't have wasted our whole night together doing this if I didn't think this was necessary. And I do think, I think some of you guys are probably going to learn a little bit about object-oriented programming, and also it's going to be awesome. Okay. At least I think so. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is the run. Let's see, we can close. Let's close down a lot of this stuff. Just don't have so many files open. Custom validator, we'll leave that open. We'll leave register open. Form helpers we can close. All right, so let's create a new validator, and this one's going to go really fast because this is going to be just like our minimum. So this one's going to be max validator.php, and I'm actually just going to copy all this code to my max validator, and we will change the name of this class to max validator. It still extends custom validator. The exception would be now we need to make sure that this is less than or equal to our rule. Okay, so let's go and just test this one out. Go to our users and let's change min validator to max validator right there, and we'll just leave that at 6. So now it'll fail if we go over 6 and pass if we're under 6. Okay, and this isn't useful, so we're not going to keep that, but actually we are going to do something there. So now username, if I just do AS, this will actually pass and insert it into the database. So if I go here, there it is, delete that. But if I type in something longer than 6, it's going to give us an error. Your username must be at least 6 characters. Now that message didn't make sense because we still have this set here. So I'm going to put this back to min validator, and let's go and look at the register controller. So for username, we had a maximum of 150 characters. So we had, before on our username, we had, it was required, it's unique to the users table, and it's a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 150. Hello, Abbas. I think that's how you. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Abbas says hello. Hello, welcome. We are doing a heavy refactor on the validation stuff. Awesome. All right, so max validator is done. This is done. But what we want to do is inside of our users, we want to validate this. So watch how cool this is. I want to add an additional validation. So all I have to do is say this run validation, and then we're going to say new max validator. We're passing this. And then for our array, we're going to say field, we're still checking on username. Let's make our rule 9 for now, just to double check. And then for our message, we're going to say username cannot be over, I'm going to put 150 characters here because that's what ultimately we're going to have. Characters. All right. So the max validator is, the rule is 9, but we're going to change it to 150. We're just testing it, okay? So here, let's go back, and we're not going to put anything. We'll hit register, and it says your username must be at least 6 characters. If I put AS, it should still say that. If I make it over 6, it worked, which is not what we want. Well, that is what we wanted. But if I make it over 9 now, and I say, I hope that's over 9. I'm not counting. Yeah, so now it says your username cannot be over 150 characters. That's perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to change this 9 to 150 because we know that's set up correct. 150. What this is doing is actually protecting us because in our database, let me show you that. If you go to structure, our username was set up to a variable character of a maximum of 150 characters. So we're checking on the back end before we even try to upload it or insert it into the database because it'll fail anyway. We're just going to put some validation here, then we'll let the user know, like, hey buddy, you can't do anything longer than 150 characters. That's the reason we're putting that there. Khalil, I'm sorry if I said your name wrong, man. I suck at saying stuff. I'm really tongue-tied. That's why my voice is weird, and on top of that, I'm kind of dumb, so I can't pronounce things, especially names that I'm not familiar with. So Khalil, hello, and thanks for the compliment. He says, or she, is a he. I love the framework. Used it for a production site already. That's awesome. And now with this refactor of the the validation class, buddy, you're gonna love it because, man, validation it makes stuff look so good. Like, look at this register controller now. We're gonna get rid of all of this that's commented out, and it's literally just gonna be a couple lines of code. So pretty awesome. And not only that, just for purposes of it being an MVC framework, the validation really does need to live inside the model because it's validating that data before it inserts into that database. So putting it in the model makes the most sense. And I can tell right now we are going to run out of time before we refactor everything, but it's going to be a short refactor, finishing up on the next one. So by the way, guys, this is on Bitbucket on my, if you look at Parham Curtis on Bitbucket, I am putting this series. You can get the source code on there, and then I'm going to create a branch for each video. So there'll be a branch called part 2, and if you go to that, it'll be the code as we leave it at the end of this video, and then we could start. So if you guys are coming in at later videos or whatever, no fear, just clone the branch that whatever one we're on in the series at the time, and start from there on the next live video. So Allele. All right. Thank you. I still say. All right. All right. So the next one that we want to validate. Let's see. Let's see what our original validation was on this. If we look in register for username, JJ. It is possible to merge the validation unique update into unique. Absolutely, and we're going to do that when we get to the unique validator, which we will get to. It's just one validator now. It checks everything. It's smart enough to know if it's unique or not. So yeah, that's another thing that's awesome. Okay, so I'm excited about that too because we don't need all that crap. Required. Let's do the required validator. That's super simple too. So new file, required validator.php, and I'm gonna go to copy our min validator again. Just copying stuff to make it a little faster to do this, especially because I can't type very well while talking. So required validator. Change the class name. So this one is the check for this is going to be even easier. All we're going to do is we're going to check if it's not empty. So if value is not empty, it's going to pass. All right. So let's go now and let's go back to our users and add a different validation rule. Let's make, oops, I'm going to leave all the username stuff together. So let's do first and last name validation. And this is just going to be this run validation new required validator. We pass in as the first parameter this, which is the user model object rather, and then field is going to be fname. It doesn't need a rule, but it does need a message, which this is a great time for us to not include a message because I want to show you the exception that gets thrown. So let's go and look at that real quick before I forget to do that. So if I click register, so now see we have uncaught exception that you must include a message element in the params array. So this right here is that message that we put in the constructor of the custom validator, and it's this one here. This is the message that was just thrown, and it's because we don't have a message element in that array. So that's how the system is going to help us remember to do this later on when we don't. We must add, let's just say first name not be empty. All right, and then I'm going to copy this line. We'll do the same thing for last name, except for the field we'll just say last name. So now you can see we can start running all of our validation right here in this validator class. Refresh it. Not refresh because that reposts the same data. Register. Now it's saying, hey, your first name cannot be empty. This should say last name. Got to change that. All right. Register. First name cannot be empty. Last name cannot be empty. Username must be 6 characters. So now this validation is starting to work, and it's starting to live only in the model because we're getting rid of all the validation stuff that was happening in this register controller. Okay. Let's see. I had one thing about pages like 404, 403. Class names can't start with yeah, you just, I want to know if you have a better idea for that. Yeah, adding the underscore works fine too. I do like the load 404 thing that you have. The class name though, in my opinion, what I would probably do there instead of adding new controllers for all that is I already had a we added a class called restricted. You could just add more actions to this restricted thing, and then you could use this, and then just do your actions like load 404, load 500, load 403, or whatever you're trying to do, and then you can load in views. You can add new views to this restricted that will you can add custom views for your 404s and things like that. So yeah, that's another idea. That's what I intended to happen with that in the first place. So that's what I would do. JJ says you should pass an array for all the required fields. Yeah, I mean, could do that. I don't know. I kind of like, we could absolutely do that. I like having yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a bad idea to do that. May I suggest a couple ideas for improvements? Absolutely, guys. You guys can always suggest things. Some of it, I may not agree with or whatever. Some of it I will, and we just don't have time, and some of it we'll just do. So yeah, absolutely. Always give me ideas for improvements. Most of the time, stuff that could be improved is just because I didn't think about it or haven't had time to do it yet. Yeah, so you still have to add an underscore, but if your action name was load 404 action, it starts with L, so that's the load. So just for your action names, I probably would just do something like load 404, load 403, whatever you're trying to do. So I think it'd be a great improvement for the router if somehow we had the flexibility to pass parameters to the index action method. You do. So the way that you have to do that, and it's not. This is how like Falcon and everything else works. I mean, I guess you could do some custom stuff, but really, all you have to do is seriously, if I just wanted to pass, you just do register index 123, and then it passes these parameters right into that index action. So when you create, no one's going to navigate directly to these URLs. So when you create buttons or anything that needs that to go for the index, you just include index. You don't have to leave index out. It just, because that was a default, so you don't have to type index. But if you want parameters, you put index into the URL. But oh yeah, without appending index, yeah, I might look at that. Cake PHP does that. I haven't used Cake PHP. You can do that in Falcon, but you have to like do a bunch of rules inside of the each route. So thanks for your great tutorials. Hey man, very welcome. Thank you guys for being here, man. Like I this is such a blessing for me just to hang out with a bunch of people from all over the world. So I really think like, man, it's awesome because I think if you guys knew me, yeah, custom routes, that'd be a good idea. We can probably work on that some other time for sure. But I want to finish the validation stuff up tonight. But I think it's awesome because like we may all not get along. Like so hello. So like we come from different backgrounds, maybe different countries, different religions, different like political views or ideas or anything like that. But the thing of us together right now is like the thing that bonds us is we're learning to program together. We're all trying to make our lives better in some way, and no one can take that from us. Like our ideas can't take that from us. Our prejudices and you know, worldviews and religious views and things like that can't rob from us this human interaction that we're having. And I know this not quite human because we're like not face to face, but I couldn't afford to travel to see all of you anyway. And this is just cool technology. I mean, I think it would be even cooler if we were like doing some sort of like hangout where I could see your faces too. and you guys could talk directly to me instead of me just in front of my computer. But I love the comments and just like the real-time interactions and stuff like that. That's really cool, man, and it's a blessing. It's a blessing for me too. And I just, if I can give anything back to you guys and help you improve your lives, it's awesome. So, validators. Let's continue on. The next validator that we need, let's see. Let's do another really simple one. There's two really simple ones we do, and then the unique one's a little bit harder. Let's knock out the two simple ones really quickly because I'm gonna add a new file here, and this is going to be numeric. Hopefully you guys can see, you wouldn't put them in this core validators thing, but in your projects you could put custom validators that had to do with just that project in this custom validators. But if you had some that you wanted to use in other projects that weren't specific to your application you're building, you could extend this and put it in the core validators and then use it in your framework from then on. Numeric validator. So let's do this. This is also going to extend the custom validator. And then remember, we need that. The only thing we need here is the public function run validation. Hope someday it becomes a very big community here to have a code meeting somewhere. Oh, dude, that would be so cool. Man, that would be awesome if we could like meet up somehow. Like, just like rent a hotel somewhere and like have like a meeting room and then like do this but do it live and then hang out afterwards and have dinner or stuff together. That would be awesome. I know that everybody could probably make that, but that'd be cool. Another suggestion would be auto-loading views without explicitly calling them. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of those nice to have things like that, that's cool. I mean, there's a lot of frameworks that do a lot of that kind of stuff too. We could do that. I personally, even though a lot of them do it, I like seeing in my controllers the views that are called explicitly, just so I can see them. But yeah, so like, yeah, if it's the same exact name, you know, it could be auto-loaded. That's true. All right, so let's finish this run validation here. And again, value is just going to equal this model, then this field, and then pass on this would just be equal to, and we could write this all in one line. We don't need this to be in 3 separate lines. This could be a one-line thing here, but I'm just doing this to make it real easy to read. So this is going to pass if is numeric. That's a PHP function, and then we're just going to pass value. Turn pass. All right, so let's just test that out. So like, whoa, I have access to that page that doesn't exist. I'm not logged in. All right, so on the register here, let's just do something stupid like, we're not going to keep this obviously, but we're going to do, let's just copy this, paste that, and we're going to say new numeric validator, the field, last name, sure. Actually, you know what? Let's just mess with password just for fun. And password, this doesn't make any sense. We're just testing our function. Password needs to be number. All right. So now if I go to password and I type like F here, hit register, I get that password needs to be a number. So we know that's working. If instead I put like 23 here, and register, that actually passes now. You know, the other thing, we'll have to look at this, but I don't know why these aren't highlighting red. I want to fix that. Should be highlighting those. Okay, so that's the numeric validator. That's done. I'm gonna leave this here that we can mess with it. The last real simple one is matches, and matches. What we want to do is make sure that the password field matches. So this is gonna be a real one. So, password validation. All right. So what we want to do here is create a new file, matches validator. You guys can call that something different if you don't like that, but whatever. So the class, that's the other thing with a lot of these great ideas that you guys have. There's a couple things, man. Since we're doing this as a community, like if you'd like to make changes, or I'm not gonna promise I'm gonna keep them or whatever, but if you guys want to like submit changes for me to look at, you guys can contribute, and I'll decide whether or not to merge it in. Otherwise, like feel free to just, it's your framework. Like do the changes you'd like to see, and then use your framework in your projects. I mean, that's really ultimately what's really cool about building these things. This extends custom validator. And so in this class, this one's really simple too. So its value, just like every other one, it's just going to be this. We could actually even put this this whole line right here, like value could be literally a property that already exists. But anyhow, that would have been smart to do it that way, but I didn't. All right, so value is that, and then to match this, all we need to do is return whether or not value is equal to this rule. Because we're going to pass down as a rule, we're going to pass down the matching value. Okay, let's look at that real quick. Paste that. So this one, instead of numeric validator, this is going to be the matches validator. And then password will be the password. The rule, or the field's password, but the rule on this one is actually just going to be this. Dang it. This. Confirm. And then the message we'll just say something like your passwords not match. If I just try to, okay, I got a problem, unexpected value, line 3. Whoa. That needs to be a function called run validation. I should be copying and pasting these, but I need practice typing on this new keyboard, which is a crappy, cheap keyboard. Actually, glad that I'm using Linux Mint because I actually like supporting open source stuff. Matches validator not found. I called it match. All right, so that passes. I'm gonna type in password, word password here. Can't see that, but then I'm gonna type in confirm password. I'm gonna do something completely different. Your passwords do not match. So now we know that works. If I type the same password in both of these, that part of the validation will work. If I type it correctly. password. Maybe I have something wrong with the code, or I just can't type. Could just, oh my gosh. Okay. So let's see. So let's debug it. Start throwing dump and dies everywhere. Value. You guys might see it. If you see it, go ahead and let me know. Password. All right. Try looking at this rule. Oh, yeah, I think I know what's wrong. I do know what's wrong. Rule is not going to exist. Yep, it's null. And that's because we have to update how did I that we have to basically update that. Set confirm. Okay. So I'm gonna have to create public functions. We have get confirm. I'm gonna use public function set confirm, and it's gonna take a value, and we're going to say this confirm is equal. So if this confirm is going to equal this value, but since we're probably going to just pass this right in, let's just go ahead and let's use our sanitize function just to make sure no one's doing anything kind of crappy, because this is coming from the form. So all right, and then in the register controller, we just need to, up here, and if the post is set, we just need to say new user, and then we'll say set confirm, and this will set that equal to post confirm. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's use another method we created called input get confirm. And that's actually better because that sanitizes it, so we don't need to actually do that here. We can just set that equal to value because we're sanitizing it on the way in. So get used to, if anytime you're setting anything from form data or a posted data, you're going to want to use that input get method, because that will sanitize it, the input, so they won't be able to do anything nuts there. All right, this should work now. So let's just see if that's set though. There it is. So now it's set. Now our method should work. Get rid of this dump and die. All right, so now if I type in password and password, yep, that works. If I change this to passwords, your passwords do not match. All right, what time is it? We got 10 minutes. We gotta move. If I spill a little bit over past 10, are you guys gonna be mad, or you gotta get out of here? Because we could just finish up if I run a little late. 10 minutes might be enough though. But there's a lot more refactoring we can do. Either way, we're gonna have to do a little bit of it next session anyway, to convert the rest of the forms. All right, the next one I wanted to do that's real simple is I'm just going to copy this matches validator and do a new file. I'm going to call this email validator. Right, and then we're going to return whether, oh man, actually the one thing we want to do here is we want to make sure that there is a value here. So we're going to do inside of an if statement, we're going to say if not empty value. So the reason I'm doing this is because I want the ability for people to not have, they need to be able to run an email validator even if it's not a required field. So that's why I'm doing this. So saying if not empty, then we're going to say passes is equal to filter var. This is a built-in PHP function, and then we could pass that the filter validate email constant that's built in PHP, and this is just give it's going to check if the value is a valid email. All right, so let's see. Otherwise, we just want passes. We want passes to be true, and then if it's not empty, then we're going to actually check it. So then we just need to return passes here. All right. So let's see. So we need to use that. So let's go back to our users validator class, our method, and let's validate email. Email validation, and this run validation new email validator. This so this will be must provide a valid email. Okay. So now if I don't do anything with the email, then I don't get a message. But if I just put A here, then it says you must provide a valid email, because A is not a valid email. But it can be empty. We want it to be empty, and we want to, if email is required, then we need to tell them that. So like, I think it was Khalil or someone who was saying that, or maybe it was JJ, basically an array of all required fields. You could do it that way, or you can just do it this way as well. So I'm gonna say email. I'm gonna make email required. You don't have to. Better message is say email is required. I know I'm not very consistent on these messaging and stuff because I'm just trying to show you guys how it works. I know you're gonna do a better job than me in actually using it, because this is just for demonstration purposes. Email is required now, so now we have to put something. And then while we're at it, since we know the validation's working now, we can also do JavaScript validation by just going back to our register.php and changing our email to a type of email. So now, if they try to, it won't even let them submit the form. But this is a browser thing, so you don't want to only depend on this. You want to check on the back end too, which is what we're doing. All right, 4 minutes. I'm trying to get this done in 4 minutes. Yeah, JJ said that. All right, you guys can see, man, aren't these forms starting to look pretty simple? mean, that's pretty nice. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is, let's see, we have email. I'm missing from our original validate function. I think it's just the unique one. Let's knock out unique and then we'll call it a night. Unique's not that complex. It's actually, you know, still less than 30 lines of code, but we need to do a database call to make it work. So be aware of that you are making an additional database call when you validate this on a unique, but there's no real way around that. Not a big deal. It's not gonna, unless you're doing it inside of a huge loop or something, it shouldn't be a problem. So unique validator, and I didn't even spell unique right. Unique validator, that extends the custom validator. The reason I called that custom validator is so that it's easier for you guys later to build custom validators. And we're gonna have a public function run validation. We're gonna come back to that. First thing I'm gonna do is rename this file so it works. I had a typo in it. All right, here we go. So first thing we want to do is we want to grab the field, and this is going to be a little bit different. JJ, if you do want to do an array of required fields, this is going to be real similar because you can pass an array into the unique thing, and what it's going to do is, let's say, for example, in our application we're going to have multiple vendors, and we want, in our products table, we want our vendor to each vendor can only have one product name. So we want to make it unique, but we want to make it unique for that vendor, not necessarily unique across the entire database table, just unique for that vendor. So we're going to write this in a way that you can do that with passing in an array. Okay, so in order to do that, field is going to be a little bit, instead of saying this dot field, we just need to, I'm going to do a ternary here, and I'm going to say is array. I need to know if field is an array. If this field, if that's an array, then we're actually going to take the first element in that array, and that will be our field. Okay, so we would do this field to 0 index, else we're going to make it equal to this field, because it can be, you can pass in an array or just a string. Okay, so that's how we could rewrite the unique thing, where you can, or I mean, I'm sorry, the required things like JJ was saying, but it would work exactly like this. All right, so then except for, yeah, so then our value is not going to be any different. So that's this model, this, or not this field, now it's just field, because we're setting that here. If we pass this field, it could be an array, so that'd be broken. So it has to be field. And then we need to build a custom SQL statement. So we just need to build up a statement. All right, so the first thing we need to know, I'm going to come back to the unique or the edit stuff in a second, but let's start off with our conditions. So conditions are going to equal an array. So we're going to do an array, and inside of that array, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say field, and we're going to say field is equal. So we're looking, is field equal to, and we're going to bind this, so we're just going to say a question mark. Okay, so that's our first condition. We just want to know, is field equal to, and then let's do our binds here. and that's going to be an array, and we're just going to pass in the first element array will be value. Okay, so right out of the bat, what this is going to do is build out SQL query that's going to take our field and say, hey, is it equal to the value? That's the first part that we need to know in our SQL statement. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is if we need to know if fields is array, we need to keep building that up. Okay, so if is array this field, then what we want to do is we're going to remove our field from this because we've already done this. So we're just going to say array unshift, which removes the first element in the array, and then we're just going to say this field. We're removing the actual field from the array, and everything that's left after that in this array is going to be additional conditions. So like I said earlier with vendor, the vendor ID may be the next thing on here in that array. So then after we take that off, then all we need to do is loop through those. So we're going to say for each this field as, and I don't really know what to call this variable. Maybe you guys have it's like additional fields we're checking on or something. I'm just going to call it adds. I don't know why. But we need to add to the conditions array. So we're going to use this syntax to add to the conditions array, and we're going to add this adds. So that's our field. So we're checking that, and that's also going to be, we're going to bind this as well. So we'll just need to do binds, and we're going to add this model adds. Okay, so now we can have multiple fields that we're checking on. Okay, and then what we're going to do, and we're almost done here. So that's we're only doing that if it's an array. So we're only going to loop through that if it's an array. And then what we need to do is actually we'll say our query params is an array, and this is going to be conditions. We're going to pass the conditions array down, and then bind will be our binds array. All right. So this is our query params. So now what we need to do is we actually just need to make a call to the database to see, is there any other record that matches this? Because if there are any records that match these conditions, it's not unique. Okay, so I'm just going to create other, a parameter called other, because we're looking for another record besides this one. And we're going to say this, we have access to this model, which gives us access to the database. We're going to say this model, and then we're going to run our find first method, and we're just going to pass in query params. All right, so if that returns anything, because remember find first will return false if it doesn't find anything, and it's going to return an object if it does find something. So what we need to check is we're just going to say return, and then we need to, for this to pass, we need to say not other. So for this validation, we want to know that there's no other records in the database that match these conditions, and then we'll return that. All right. The next thing we need to do is how JJ mentioned earlier. I think it was JJ. Sorry if I'm getting it wrong, but he had mentioned that that can we just combine the unique and the unique update? And so the way to do that is right here above this loop. This is really simple. So what we need to do is say if not empty, this model ID. So if the ID has something in it, then what we're going to do is just add to our conditions, and we're just going to say ID. We don't need that. We just say ID is equal to, and then we're going to bind need to bind on this model ID. Okay, so what that's going to do, JJ, is it's going to when we're updating, because remember our save function will either call update or call insert. So if there's an ID present, it runs the update method. So we don't want validation to fail if the ID is equal to this. So actually we need a not equals there. So the ID is going to add to the condition. It's going to say, if, hey, is the ID not equal to this ID of this model? So when it runs that, if it finds another record and their IDs don't match, well, it's only going to find a record if this is true, because this is creating a SQL query. I know this is a little more complex than the other validators. So do you guys have any questions on this, or did that make sense? If there's an ID, then we want to make sure that our query statement is saying, hey, ID is not equal to this ID. Otherwise, it would always fail when you try to update it. Okay? And that's it. That's the validation thing. So let's go ahead and add that to the users table, and we'll call it a night. So what we want, let's see, we'll say username, be the easy one to try out. So this run validation, and then we'll say new unique validator, this, and then our field is actually, we can do an array here, or we don't have to, but let's see, on the users table, I think we'll just do the one thing. So we're going to say username for our field, and then message that username is already taken. Let's try this out and see if it works. In my database, I have Parham Curtis is already taken. So let's try to add a new Parham Curtis. Parham Curtis register. Unexpected binds, syntax error. So let's look at that. Any files open? Unique validator. Let's see what line that was on. Line 19 probably means line 18 has something wrong with it. I'm missing a semicolon there. Stupid guys. Parham Curtis. All right. Register. Property exists. Array given. And that is because oh, what? Did I not call that right? Field is an array. One element. Field does not belong to the model. Where did I go wrong? Oh, okay. So the custom validator is throwing this exception right here. So let's see. How did I handle that? Yeah, we just need to add that check there. So property Give me 1 second, guys. Tires. Oh, okay. I know what's up. Okay, so what we need to do is in this exception, or in the custom validator, when it's checking these exceptions, is we basically need to check if the field is an array because of this. So what we're gonna do is right here, where we're saying this field equals params field, we need to do a ternary here. And we're just gonna say, and this is a custom validator, so we're just gonna say if is array params field, then what we want to set this equal to params field, and then we would set it to the first element of the array. Else, if it's not an array, we're just going to set it to the field. That'll fix that. May not be the last error because that's just how tonight's going. But all right, so yeah, so now we have this error that says that username is already taken. So let me try one that's not in my database. And now that error message went away. So that seems to be working just fine. That username is already taken. Okay, so let's see. All right, guys, we didn't quite get the entire refactor done for validators. We did build all of our validators. There's still a few more things we need to change, so I think the beginning of the next session, we'll finish that up. We'll convert all of our forms to use this. There's a few changes I need to show you about, and there's one downside to doing our validators in this way. And I'll give you a hint. I think the benefits far outweigh the downside. Is anytime we're trying to do a form that doesn't have a model, so it doesn't have, like, so for instance, when people are logging in, there's not a table called login, but we need to create a model for login, which you would have to do that traditionally in an MVC anyway. But we're going to create a model even though there's not a database table, and we're going to have to run the validators there. Not a big deal. It's like 4 or 5 lines of code extra for one form. The rest of the forms, most of the time when you're submitting a form, it's going to have something to do with one of the tables in the database, so it's all good. There are a few more. I think the last thing I'll do is just finish up validation on this form before we leave, so I don't forget to do it, but it's going to be just copy and paste stuff super fast. So the email validator, we just need to make sure that the maximum, so we're going to copy this max. The maximum we set for that, I believe, is 155. So email, 150. So the max validator for email will also be 150. So we'll just say email cannot be over 150 characters. Then let's see, email, valid email, password, username. I think we're done. I think that's all of them. So we can just delete this now. And save. And now look at our nice pretty little register action. Look how few lines of code that is. We create the user. We check if there's post. If there's post, we're in this case we had to do a set confirm. Most of the time we would just have to do this assign. And we attempt to save it. And because the save method has the validate, it runs the validator. And if it works, it does the redirect. If not, it displays the errors. So that's it. I think that's a lot cleaner, especially in our controllers. Um, a couple things real quick that we'll have to do next time. We're going to add a hook called before save on our model so that before it saves this, it converts the password to be a hashed password. As it stands right now, because I'm just using that as sign, it's just something we didn't get to tonight, but because I just use that as sign, it would be a plain text password in the database. Not a big deal. It'll take one line of code to fix that, and we'll do that in the next video. And then we'll convert our login form, and then we're completely done with that, and we will continue on with the e-commerce site. I think next time we'll build our admin panel after we finish the refactor. I'm sorry it went a little long tonight. We didn't get that done. But I hope you guys learned a little bit of something, and I hope this was valuable for you. And so thank you guys. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for subscribing. And that's it, guys. I'm out. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great night.